out there, but
Okay.
So I keep in touch with a couple of the guys, but not with the whole group out there. No, there's been a lot of changes and turnover and stuff.
Yeah, so some really good friends of mine, she passed away years ago, but she was a archaeology professor at the University of Calgary, and her specialty was the Yaqui Indians. And she's written several books, and one of them is called Yaqui Women.
Mhm.
And if you ever talk to them down there, she's like, they just think she's amazing. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, we did. I worked both. There's a little section just down. It's just south of Chandler. There's just a whole little area, and the name of the clinic's Las Fuentes. And then there's a big group of them down in Tucson, and I actually worked at both.
Yeah, cool. Okay, Erin. Oh, she's.
Hello, this is Luann. Can I interrupt just a second?
Sure.
Denny, Carrie Howard is trying to get in, and I don't know if you're able to let her in.
Okay, Dr. Tuggle, can you let her in?
She's joining right now. She's going to be let in.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
And after she joins, I will make Dr. Tuggle the host.
Okay, it's not. Do you see anything, Mike? No.
We're still waiting for Carrie Howard to actually get into the room, and then I'll make you the host, and then you can share your screen.
Okay, perfect. In the interim, I think Mike's going to sing for us.
Beautiful.
Not a chance. How's weather in Alaska?
Today, well, we started off with this amazing summer. All of June, it was warm. I mean, we had a couple of days like close to 80, and it was incredibly sunny. And now it's just raining. It's just in the mid 50s, and it's back to rain. Lots of rain.
I can't tell you how nice 50s and rain would be right now.
What is
when
it?
when you're 110, 115?
Oh my gosh. I don't miss that at all, Dr. Tuggle. Not at all. Okay.
I don't know why it's not letting Carrie in. It just keeps on saying joining for her. If the person that was in contact with her would ask her to leave and come back.
Hit the view. Mirren.
Huh?
No, I said Mirren.
So you want to do your, yeah.
Where's my hand?
Luann, did you hear that? Could you have Carrie leave and then come back in?
Okay.
Yes, I will.
Full screen.
She might be in now. We'll see. Oh no, okay. Well, I'm going to elevate Dr. Tuggle to the host so he can share his slides.
Danny, say something.
Well, I had this great introduction. I had this great introduction plan, but I guess I'll just let Dr. Tuggle take it away. So Dr. Tuggle, when you're ready to start your presentation, just go ahead.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if we can make this work. All right, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right, it worked. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Parkinson's and dementia, prevention and slowing progression through nutrition and exercise. My name is Dr. James Tuggle. I'm in private practice at Desert Sierra Medical in Scottsdale, Arizona. One of the things I was going to say on here is, kind of the disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only. It's not specific medical advice. So anything you see in here, if you want to start a new treatment, please consult your healthcare provider. All right. So most of you probably know this, but I'm just going to go through it if there's any caregivers or family or anything. So what is Parkinson's disease? Parkinson's disease is a neurological disorder that causes uncontrollable movements such as shaking, stiffness, and difficulty with balance and coordination. Symptoms usually begin gradually and worsen over time. As the disease progresses, people have difficulty walking and talking. Basically, it's a dopamine deficiency in the area of the brain that coordinates movement. Dopamine is both a neurotransmitter and down in the adrenal glands, it's a hormone. Our focus here is basically the neurotransmitter role. Okay, this affects, and as the neurotransmitter, it affects movement, memory, that pleasure center, behavior, cognition, attention, sleep and arousal, mood, learning, and then even lactation. And I don't know if you guys, I've got the slide going, but I don't know if y'all want to have it where you can pop in, ask questions, or if you may just go through this and then you can ask questions at the end.
Yeah, we're going to have a question and answer period at the end, Dr. Tuggle.
Perfect. Okay. So etiology of Parkinson's, as most of you know, is unknown, but we do know there is a small genetic factor. There's also an association with excessive exposure to certain toxins like pesticides. There's also a lot of association now with neuroinflammation, that microinflammation in the brain, and as most neurodegenerative diseases, the oxidative stress. Okay, and now since we're talking about dementia, we'll go ahead and kind of define that one also. What is dementia? Dementia is the loss of cognitive functioning, thinking, remembering, and even reasoning. Up to 80% of Parkinson's disease patients will develop dementia in 10 years after developing Parkinson's disease. Data shows that Parkinson's and dementia decreases life expectancy approximately 1 to 2 years. Okay, so the biggest reason we want to work preventatively is not just life expectancy, but quality of life. Incidents of Parkinson's disease are increasing across the board, and amazingly enough, we're starting to see younger people. They did a 2017 analysis, and that showed 50% increase in Parkinson's disease in younger adults. It wasn't still a huge number, but just we're seeing a huge increase in that. Okay, so now we're going to go. When I was looking at nutrients for Parkinson's and dementia, there is a plethora of studies going on, and kind of every nutrient you could think about, it seems like, was being studied in there. So we went through large. So what I tried to do is, one, narrow this down to, because we're on a limited amount of time. And then the second, I was trying to find ones that cross over between Parkinson's and dementia. So one, I know it's very basic, but it's actually maybe one of the more important nutrients. There's a tremendous amount of research going on with B12. I read studies dating all the way back to the 60s, all the way up to 2022. B12 deficiencies are found very commonly in Parkinson's disease, and it's the most common physical disease in dementia. B12 is very neuroprotective. B12 deficiencies affect cognitive function, even in non-dementia and non-Parkinson's disease patients. One of the things I typically like to explain to my patients is B12 is to the brain tissue, to that nervous tissue, as exercise is to muscles. So a B12 deficiency, we actually see the brain atrophy. As lack of exercise, we would see muscles atrophy. The next nutrient is folic acid, which is B9. That plays a big role with B12 in reduction of homocysteine levels. A lot of the studies with Parkinson's disease and folic acid, especially in the 90s and 2000s, had a heavy focus on homocysteine. They're still looking at it currently today, but there was really a lot of studies in that time. Elevated homocysteine has been associated with development and progression of Parkinson's disease. In genetic testing, which is newer, that they started testing, there's a gene called the MTHFR gene, and that actually appears to be a larger risk factor for Parkinson's and dementia. A defect of the MTHFR gene means you have impaired ability to methylate your B vitamins. So a typical B12 or B9, if you have a defect in the MTHFR gene, means you don't process those well. So to kind of get around this, you can already purchase methylated B12 or folic acid. And I typically do that with my patients because if you don't have a defect in the MTHFR gene, it's not going to hurt anything to take a methylated B12 or folic acid. But if you do, it skips that whole process. And that could be some of the underlying component of the Parkinson's and dementia. Okay, so B6 is kind of interesting. There's been some good studies showing B6 appears to play a good prevention role in Parkinson's. So if you have a big family history of Parkinson's, I would recommend getting on B6. But once you have Parkinson's, when you take L-DOPA alone, actually B6 can decrease the effectiveness of the L-DOPA. So you've got to be careful with that. The other thing is if you have a high risk for Parkinson's, I always recommend, you can take, a lot of the data said 5 to 10 milligrams, but you can take safely up to about 50. Exceeding 100 milligrams daily for long-term can cause some toxicity. So I always recommend to my patients 50 or less. That way, if they're getting a little bit from a multivitamin or some other thing they're taking, we're not exceeding that 100 long-term. Okay, and then of course you almost can't have a talk these days without vitamin D3, and there is a lot of studies going on D3 right now. It has a lot of previous studies, and there's a lot of current ones going on with NIH and a lot of different groups on Parkinson's disease. D3 deficiency appears to be more common in Parkinson's patients than people without Parkinson's. This is one nutrient your doctor should not have any issues testing. There's been enough data and everything that a lot of primary cares and neurologists and everything shouldn't have a problem running your vitamin D levels and having that tested. Different labs say different things. National guidelines have the range as 30 to 100. I find optimal is around 50 to 80. So that's where I target getting patients. D3 has been shown to have to help with various symptoms of Parkinson's disease, and it has a lot of benefit in delaying decreased cognitive function. And it actually, because Parkinson's disease has a lot of mood disorders because of the drop in dopamine, and it seems to help quite a bit with moods. Also, it's, because we know it works with bones, it's been shown to reduce the risk of both falls, and that was actually a pretty big one, as well as fractures, and that's the D3 helping the calcium get into the bone. A point I wanted to mention is that it is pretty common in medicine that you'll read 2 good studies and have a different outcome. This always can be for a lot of reasons. It could be different dosing, it can be the population, everything. So when I was reading through a lot of these nutrient studies, I would pick the ones that had, if I looked through 16 studies, I would pick the ones that had 12 or 13 really good, even though you might see one that says it doesn't work. A lot of times that was a dosage issue, or could have just been the population or something like that. Okay. Next, and this one has actually got a lot of research going on and a lot of neurodegenerative diseases, turmeric. And behind it, you'll see a 95% extract. That's the extract is the curcumins or curcumoids, and those are the very important ingredient in that. Turmeric is really shown to be a great anti-inflammatory, as well as it has a lot of other important properties. They did an interesting, this is not with Parkinson's, but they did it as looking at it as an anti-inflammatory. They did an interesting study. They did a blind study with ibuprofen and turmeric. For about the first 4 or 5 days, the ibuprofen, it was the first 4 days, the ibuprofen group subjectively reported better results. But by day 5, the turmeric group started reporting better results. And by the end of the study, it was significantly better. They ran those micro-inflammatory markers as well as macro-inflammatory markers, and turmeric just kicked its butt in both areas. So unlike when we see ibuprofen and although Tylenol is not an anti-inflammatory, some of these analgesics have an increase in that micro-inflammation in the heart where we're seeing more heart attacks. Turmeric actually has benefit. It reduces a lot of that micro-inflammation. So that was just kind of a side note. There's a lot of research right now looking with Parkinson's at the micro versus macro inflammation. Just so you kind of have an idea of the difference, macro inflammation is when you twist an ankle or twist your knee and you get that swelling, that's macro inflammation. Micro inflammation is the inflammation associated with small but chronic amounts of inflammation. We're typically seeing that in the organs like the heart, the brain, and that actually in the brain is what's associated with both Parkinson's and dementia. In 2018, a UCLA study found people who took curcumin, the active ingredient in turmeric, had significantly better memory and attention versus the placebo group. The study taking curcumin over the next 18 months improved their memory by 28%. The great thing about turmeric is it's been found to be well tolerated. It's got very few side effects, and the side effects it does have are usually pretty mild gastrointestinal symptoms. Not a whole lot of allergy with it, but occasionally. Curcumin is also another neuroprotective agent with antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, free radical scavenging. It protects the mitochondria, and it even actually has some effects chelating iron, which can be a component, especially in men with some of the toxicity in the brain. It also enhances dopamine levels in the brain. In a study published in Experimental and Therapeutic Medicine, researchers found that turmeric may protect the nervous system from some of the toxins, like the pesticides, involved in causing nervous system degeneration and Parkinson's disease. When looking for turmeric, again, I want to kind of go back to it is very important that you find one with the 95% extract. Just the spice curcumin, turmeric by itself, has some curcumin in it, but it's not all that effective. You need to flip the bottle over and make sure it's about a 95% extract. For people taking it prophylactically, I usually have them take about 500 milligrams daily prophylactically just to keep that microinflammation down on the heart and the brain and other areas. When we're doing something as far as a treatment, like either macro or microinflammation with it, I usually have patients do about 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Even though it's not really, they haven't shown any toxicities at higher doses, that seems to be about the most effective dose. And you want to split it to 3 times a day because it does have a certain half-life, so it won't make it 24 hours. Okay, now fish oil. Fish oil is another supplement that targets this microinflammation. It has benefits with triglycerides, and it was which actually was FDA approved as a medication for this. In 2007, they did an interesting Canadian study, and that's where they started looking at the protective effects of omega-3s and Parkinson's. What they did is they took the mice and added DHA plus other omega-3 fatty acids to their food, and then they had a placebo group that did not get omega-3s. They did this diet for about 10 months, and then both groups were given a chemical that kills the same brain cell that dies off in Parkinson's. The mice on the omega-3s lost significantly less of the cells, indicating that omega-3 appeared to be very neuroprotective than the mice in the placebo group. Another interesting study, this is more of clinical, is they did a large cohort and they followed 8,006 Japanese men in Hawaii. The cohort study was called the Honolulu Asia Aging Study. And over these 30 years, men that had higher levels of dietary omega-3 showed significantly less association or development of Parkinson's disease. Okay, now here's one. there's a lot of issue, and we're going to talk about sleep in a couple of minutes as far as with Parkinson's, but I was looking actually specifically for something that seemed to affect, that would help with sleep and kind of calm the brain down. And because insomnia or sleep disturbances affect approximately 2/3 of Parkinson's patients. One of the things, and what I was looking for was, theanine actually raises something called alpha waves in the brain. It just kind of helps calm and relax our brain down. When I started looking at the literature, there was a significant amount that I was not expecting that shows that theanine, and it's an amino acid in green tea, has significant protective effects in Parkinson's. It also has, some, it's a good antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, but they actually showed in one study that as a potent natural agent, it against L-DOPA-induced dyskinesia. It also improved motor behavioral abnormalities, and it actually increased dopamine availability. So what I was looking for was just sleep actually is being researched, and they may end up using it as a treatment for Parkinson's down the road. The research does kind of still, a lot of the studies that we're looking at were 2020, 2021, 2022. So still kind of appears in its infancy, but it does show there is a lot of potential with Parkinson's and theanine. What I typically do with patients, especially for sleep, if they're having sleep issues, is I have them do about 200 milligrams of theanine at night. There's some more specific calculations you can do. If it's a really big guy or something, you can calculate a certain amount per kilogram. But I usually am pretty safe for most people, just having them do 200 milligrams at bedtime. Again, I don't want you to do anything that would go against whoever your healthcare provider is, but it's theanine has shown to be extremely safe. Same green tea, so you can kind of do with theanine. If you're allowed to have green tea, you can have theanine. They've done some good studies on kids as little as 5 years old, and the safety profile is very, very high. All right. So what is inflammation? And I know we kind of talked about macro and micro inflammation. The inflammation is the response of a sudden body damage or change, such as cutting your finger. To heal the cut, your body sends inflammatory cells to the injured. This also occurs with a twisted ankle, a bacterial infection, a viral infection, anything that will cause us to have an immune response. Chronic inflammation is when your body continues to send these inflammatory cells even when there is no outside danger. This is what we see with autoimmune disease as well as many chronic diseases. Eating excessive amounts of processed food can keep your body also in a chronic inflammatory state. And we'll go into that a little bit more when we get to the food part. Okay, so do I exercise and how much? Research has shown that exercise can improve gait, balance, tremor, flexibility, grip strength, and motor coordination in Parkinson's patients. Exercise such as treadmill training and biking have all shown benefit, along with Tai Chi and yoga. So far, studies have shown engaging in any level of physical activity is beneficial rather than being sedentary. And a lot of groups now are going away from even calling it exercise or calling it movement. So getting up, walking around, and just keeping your body moving. This is associated with improved motor symptoms. For people with mild to moderate Parkinson's disease, you can actually do targeted exercises that can address specific symptoms. For example, aerobic exercise improves fitness. Walking exercise can assist in gait. Resistance training strengthens muscles. I'd recommend actually meeting with the healthcare provider that can assist in determining these exercises very specific for you. One study was interesting that I read, even showed that twice a week tango lessons, which my wife would love to get me in, but twice a week tango lessons helped with people with Parkinson's disease improve motor symptoms. Balancing and walking speed. Exercise also improved cognition, depression, fatigue, and the research in this area is still ongoing. Another study with Parkinson's, people that exercise regularly for 2.5 hours a week for 2 years had a significantly smaller decline in mobility and had improved quality of life. Again, just kind of another support of just getting out there and moving and making sure you're doing something. 2.5 hours is 30 minutes, 5 times a day. Not a whole lot for that kind of improvement. There's a strong general consensus among physicians and physical therapists that improved mobility by exercising may improve thinking, memory, and reduce the risk of falls. By avoiding complications from falls, you can prevent further injury. Even people that don't have Parkinson's, when they've looked at this time, we know people that exercise vigorously, for example, running or cycling, have much fewer changes in their brains caused just by aging. Animal studies they've done on the brain with exercise and Parkinson's showed that it also improved Parkinson's symptoms. Okay, so neurologists typically recommend a regimented exercise program to their patient and also preventatively to people who are worried about Parkinson's due to family hereditary. I'd always tell you, get together with your team, your doctor, your PT, your chiropractor, et cetera, and come up with an exercise regimen that is safe and targeted for you. They also showed, actually it was a mouse study, but it was still good. They showed that exercise on their brains made these mice use their dopamine, even with less dopamine, use their dopamine more effectively. Okay, now sleep and Parkinson's. So sleep disturbances are common in Parkinson's disease and compromise the entire spectrum of sleep disorders. Dysregulation of the sleep-wake cycle is affected by Parkinson's. Hand control of motor activity seems to impair some the REM sleep, which creates REM sleep behavior disorders. Sleep hygiene is extremely important from everything I read, even more so than, I mean, it's important for everybody, but even more so with the problems that Parkinson's patients have with sleep. Stick into regular bedtimes, consistent bedtime routine consisting of, relaxing, reading a book, listening to some music, regular exercise, preferably though, if you're going to do exercise, which is important, but doing it earlier in the day and not too late at the end so you don't stimulate and keep yourself up. Avoid caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, especially in the later parts of the day. Avoid late meals at night. That interferes with everybody's sleep. And then here's a really important one that is whether you have Parkinson's or just in general sleep issues, is be sure and turn off those screens at least 1 hour before bedtime. The light from the screen can decrease your natural melatonin levels. And if you're anything like my patients, all these current events and everything they're reading on the iPad gets their stress levels and anxieties up, which is not good preparation for sleep. Okay, so now we're going to go into kind of macros. That was some of the micros. So now we're going to go into macronutrition and Parkinson's and dementia. Okay, so what is the best diet for Parkinson's or dementia? I get asked that kind of for everything, but the data and support, the studies out there show that you don't want to have high or low blood sugar. Both are associated with an increase and faster progression of Parkinson's disease and dementia symptoms. So my first focus would be to keep your blood sugar stable. This is typically accomplished by eating small meals multiple times a day. Watch foods that are going to spike your blood sugar, which can result in both high and low sugars. A lot of times when you're feeling like a low blood sugar, your instinct is to grab something sweet like juice or a soda or something like that, and you're going to get a spike, which is going to go high, which is not good for your Parkinson's, but then you're going to get a reactive drop in the blood sugar and end up low again. Here's the part that nobody likes, but this is probably one of the most important parts. Foods that we try to avoid are called refined carbs: breads, pastas, sweets, even alcohol. These foods require your pancreas to release insulin, which is an inflammatory hormone in nature. Over time, this also increases insulin resistance, which is heavily associated with dementia and is one of the factors that is shown to make Parkinson's disease symptoms progress very rapidly. Make sure your doctor tests your A1C and your fasting blood sugar. Keeping an eye on those sugars is very important. You want to make sure that, again, you're not running low and hypoglycemic, but you really want to make sure you're not getting insulin resistant and running high. And not to make it complicated, but if you remember, I would even ask your doctor to run a fasting insulin. The more data you can get about blood sugar, the better and more comprehensive you can work from a nutritional as well as supplemental aspect to control that blood sugar and keep it very stable. Okay. So people always ask about the different diets. What's the best diet for that? And you know, the looking at diets with Parkinson's, if you want something easy, the Mediterranean diet seems very good with Parkinson's, and it's also very good with dementia. That's a diet that keeps blood sugars pretty stable. My response to my patients, though, is always tell them the human diet. If you can't pick it, hunt it, or fish it. So I ask my patients, if you were sitting in a cave, are these foods you could go out and find? And since we don't have like deep fryers in caves, that wouldn't include fried chicken or French fries. Diet should be high in vegetables, high in healthy fats, some fruit. And then your proteins are important, especially from a fish source, but should be done in moderation. The one I always tell, again, with the fish, because people like sushi, and but watch excessive amounts of tuna because of the heavy metals like mercury. One of the big neurology groups here that's in our area, when they are seeing a patient with the suspected neurodegenerative disease, one of the first things they look at is heavy metals as part of their initial evaluation. So a lot of those, especially as men, because we never have a menses, we can't get rid of mercury out of our body as well as other heavy metals. So we really want to keep an eye on those. Okay, and then the next one that I get asked quite a bit, what about intermittent fasting? Is it a good or a bad idea? I looked and didn't see a specific study on Parkinson's and intermittent fasting. Here would be my concern with it. I have no issues with intermittent fasting, and there has shown to be some benefit, but with Parkinson's, because blood sugar stability is so important, and even low blood sugars seem to have such a negative effect on Parkinson's, unless I found some good data supporting it, I would still recommend making sure you're eating small meals through the day. If you feel like your sugar drops again, watch the refined carbs. I know that's such a go-to and you want to grab, but again, you're going to get that reactive drop. Your best bet preventatively is just kind of staying with healthy foods, healthy fats, and protein to small times throughout the day to make sure it doesn't drop. Okay, well, we cut off a bunch because I thought I was going to run way over, but I ran through this a little faster than I thought I would. So ultimately, our goal with this disease process is to slow the progression of the disease while we're still looking for a cure, and then keep quality of life as high as possible during this time. Okay.
So Dr. Tuggle, I'm sure there's a lot of people with a lot of questions because, well, one question I have, and then if people can just speak up. So when you talk about, pick it, hunt it, or fish it, a lot of people that's really overwhelming for them. So in terms of just really, and especially in our environment, when you talk about changing your diet, a lot of the people in this group are on fixed incomes, right? And with inflation being so out of control right now, could you just sort of suggest some foods? I mean, like I know that, for instance, quinoa is a good food, and just some, like, can you just give us some just basic guidelines on some good grains, like 2 or 3 good grains and 2 or 3, processed carbs. I mean, what people do is they still like, they'll look at that and they go, oh, here's an example. You
Okay.
can go to
Yeah,
Costco
absolutely.
and
So-
you go ahead.
One of the things that you can actually do for yourself when you want to look at that is, about any food out there, do a quick internet search and say white rice and glycemic index. So and that basically is telling how much that's spiking in the body. So one that I really like is black rice. And so a kind of a magic number that appears is some groups say 50, some say 55 is glycemic index. And it's just a number that we try to stay under. You don't have to really know the definition of it. Well, when we look at, say, white rice has a glycemic index of about 72. Brown rice, even though it's better, it's still not a great one. Its glycemic index is about 68. So, again, that's a good point on the grains, because a lot of times we go, well, I'm eating brown rice, that's so much better than white rice. Black rice, and actually, once you try it, it's kind of more grainy tasting. It actually, to me, tastes better than either of the other two. And its glycemic index is closer to about 45, 46. So it actually goes closer to a bean and is really healthy for you. Quinoa has a lower glycemic index. That is a good one you can mix in. And then go in with a lot of, you're good with all the beans. So going with a black bean or edamame is a great one, as long as you don't do high amounts of sodium, kind of throwing those beans in. I find, like, for me to kind of get away, especially when I'm trying to get away from carbs, a couple things that I feel really helps with me is making hummus. And I feel like I can take and dip my chicken or my vegetables or that in hummus, and I kind of feel like my brain feels like it's getting a refined carb, but hummus is a bean and has a much better glycemic index. The other one that I feel like is almost a cheat, but I'll make guacamole. I do lower on the sodium. I know a lot of people do more sodium, but you can do all the spices in there, and there's a lot of healthy spices. I'll throw garlic and all kinds of healthy spices and mash it up. And that one seems to help quite a bit too. That's kind of I feel like a cheat for me if I'm really craving some refined carbs. And it's funny, there's a package one, and I'm not recommending package, but I actually found it and then I made my own. And again, I know it's a little bit of a hassle, but if you get like an air fryer these days, it makes it pretty simple. I take and I chop a banana up in really thin little slices and just put it in on the air fryer and basically make it into banana chips. And I dip that in salsa, and that's my chips.
So you took bananas, you sliced up bananas and you put them in the air fryer.
Right. And just put them on
so that made a chip. You could do that with sweet potatoes too.
You absolutely could. And sweet potatoes are great too.
Okay. It looks like we have a question.
Okay.
A man named Phil. Are you there, Phil?
A man named Phil. I like it. It sounds like a movie. Dr.
Yes.
Tuggle. Tuggle, correct pronunciation?
That's correct.
You move fast. I like that. And everybody wants to get a piece of you. So I have 4 questions. Are you're in Scottsdale?
I am.
Do you travel at all, like once a month somewhere?
I don't. I can barely keep up with my practice right now.
Understood. So my first question, are you taking new patients?
Unfortunately, right now we are so busy that I'm not. We had to kind of cut that down. I was doing everything I could, and it's kind of overwhelming. So about Christmas time, we've had to cut that down.
Do you play pickleball?
You know what? It's funny. One of the treatments I do is PRP, and I have got a huge following of pickleball people, but I haven't played yet. It's something I do want to play.
Gotcha.
I played tennis. I played a little bit of college tennis. So yeah,
right up your alley. Are you familiar with a Dr. Evidente?
I'm not.
Okay, that's all right. Number 3, the B12, 9, 6, and 3. Without breaking everything down and studying it, it sounds like those are all good. I'm just going to run out tomorrow and get those B vitamins and start to introduce them into my little pill dispenser.
When you start looking at any neurodegenerative disease, I mean, I think B12 is imperative. I've got a lot of Alzheimer's in my family, and with the research and body of data out there, I give myself shots. I keep my B12 levels really high. There's very little toxicity found with it. and a lot of benefit.
Thank you. Last question. Did I hear you right? You said that with Parkinson's, a person's expected age or time of death is decreased by 1 to 2 years.
No, that's when you get Parkinson's and dementia together. Sorry, I kind of did that fast. But when you have that combination, the data appears it reduces life expectancy by 1 to 2 years.
So if you don't have dementia, but dementia in 80% of the patients come with Parkinson's. So
right. But again, how does that data look if you are doing all these things preventatively? I mean, that's when, when I look at a typical just American patient out there, let's just talk some statistics. I recently had kind of a business trip. I had to go over to Paris, and I was walking around and I noticed how everybody looked thinner. They weren't
don't say thinner.
Right. Well, but when it's funny. So I just pulled it up. I'm kind of notorious. Denise knows I can move down a rabbit hole really quickly. So I pulled up and looked at their obesity rates, and their obesity rates are about 10%. Well, I went back and, we've had that, back when I started practicing 20 years ago, it was 2 out of 3 Americans overweight or obese, and it was about 30% were obese. I just looked up, and in 2017, we were now as high as like 42.6% of the population's obese, with a trend by 2025 to be, if nothing changes, to be at 50% of the population. And I don't see anything that's changed trends. So we're 2022, we're probably at 46, 47% of the population. So I think I think it's going to be very different, again, how you take care of yourself. If you're working preventatively to take healthy things, if you start watching that nutrition and keeping the insulin resistance down, I think you may have a tendency to not just live to life expectancy beyond that. And I think you'll have a good chance to prevent a lot of the dementia symptoms from coming on.
I'll wrap my little thing up, but I don't mean to be flippant, but if my life expectancy were 84 and now I've got Parkinson's with dementia not far behind, and I'm going to live to be 82, I'm sort of like, well, that's not that bad. If there was a 10-year difference, then I would go ahead.
But it's more to it than just that as far as life expectancy. I mean, it's quality of life. When you start getting into the dementia, that's a progressive disease. So you start forgetting, it starts off small, and by the time you get to dementia and you don't recognize your spouse or you don't recognize your family. But, when we can work preventatively, and even, if I'm going to develop dementia, the longer, that's actually because of my family history, that's one of my bigger fears. I do a lot of things to work preventatively. I take turmeric daily. I take 500 milligrams every day. I keep my B12 levels really high. I just, so y'all know, I don't practice what I preach. About 3.5 years ago, I went to a conference, and there was this PhD, MD researcher guy, and he started going over all this nutrition, and he was talking about, they had done a lot of research, and he was talking about the steps when you completely cut refined carbs out of your body. So after I heard it, I thought, well, I'm going to go do that. So I got out, and the amount of refined carbs I took in at that time, I didn't feel like was very much. In fact, I bet compared, my BMI was good, and compared to the majority of Americans, it would be extremely low. It was maybe once or twice a week. I felt like I was going through a drug detox. I mean, for 6 weeks, I felt like I needed to be curled up in the corner, just, shaking, trying to, cut these refined carbs. But after that, I started going through this, what he told us as far as the next steps that would be. And so if you asked me before that, how's your energy? I'd been like, great. I've always been a high energy person. I feel good. I'm a runner. I, exercise on a regular basis. But I noticed I've got he was 8 at the time, or 7 at the time, but I've got a 10-year-old now. He plays club soccer. And I noticed about 2 months later, I was out there playing with him and kicking the ball. And when he'd make like a knucklehead kick, I'd go, dude, you go chase it. Well, all of a sudden I was running after balls and doing things and I caught myself and I was like, oh my gosh, I do have more energy. And so now I've got, it's been 3.5 years. We're getting closer to 4 that I've even had I've had a piece of bread, a pasta, a sweet, anything. And after you get past the first 6 weeks, it's actually not bad.
Okay. Okay. Are you from Louisiana? I'm done.
Nope. I'm from Texas.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for coming on our show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Let's see. Lois Henderson has a question. She says, my multivitamin has B12, 50 micrograms, which it says is 2,083% of what we need. Why would we need that much?
It's got 15 micrograms.
Well, that's what she says, but I'm thinking it must be milligrams, right?
Yeah, it's got to be more than that. That's well, the thing on B12 is when they've looked, 2 of the bigger dementia Alzheimer's groups, again, that's kind of an area I've delved into because of my family history. And 2 of them have looked at and seen their groups with dementia and Alzheimer's. They believe a big part of that is B12 deficiencies. And again, their studies, it's like I just said in the thing, it is the most abundant disease state in dementia. So, again, looking at our American culture, I don't necessarily go with an RDA. I kind of look at cost benefit of things. There's very little toxicity. My benefit in keeping it at really good levels, I feel like keeps my brain from atrophy and it keeps me very healthy.
Okay. Let's see. We have another question. Is avocado one of the good fats?
Absolutely. Love avocado. It's a
Okay,
super.
so how much avocado should a person, like, one a day, or?
I wouldn't say there's like if it's a healthy fat that you love, obviously just like anything else, we're calories in, calories out. So I don't want somebody gaining a bunch of weight with it, but avocado has shown a lot of benefit in our body. If you had a little avocado with every meal, I think you could probably get away with 1.5 avocados a day and not have too many issues. And it's
Okay.
nice and filling. And like I said, it's got a lot of benefit for our body.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Does anybody else want to speak up? Let's see. I've got a question about exercise. So when you say, like, Fitbits are a big deal now, right? A
Yep.
lot of people have Fitbits. So how many, like, if you have a Fitbit, how many steps should a person get?
Okay, so the kind of everybody out there is saying 10,000 steps, but if you actually look at the data, if you can just achieve about 7,500 a day, that's ideal. But when they've looked at steps and they compare like 2,500 to 3,500 to 4,500, every 1,000 steps you go up is significantly better. So it kind of depends on, again, where we're at. If you have a disease like Parkinson's, or if you have carrying excessive weight or anything, we'll start low and make some little mini goals with yourself. Again, I like exercise, but I also like the word movement. Just get that body moving. If you look, I do the Apple, and then I've also got the Aura Ring. Both of those keep track of my steps. And so if, I actually started at a certain place going, okay, here's my target. And I've progressively just moved that up as I've become more conditioned, with walking. But ultimately, I guess if you want to say what would be a great target, I would say 7,500 eventually.
Okay. Somebody asked for you to repeat the vitamin 12 intake again. I think you explain things so fast sometimes that people have to keep up. So if you would repeat the vitamin B12 intake recommended.
Okay, so again, a lot of times on vitamins, I don't necessarily, when the FDA set those up, that's looking that you're already at good levels. That's looking at that you're eating a healthy diet, of lots of vegetables and fruits and all this stuff. So what they're looking at is not the typical American diet. And a lot of times you don't have to do certain things. If you look and, for a guy, we're supposed to eat like 7 to 8 servings of vegetables a day. If you're getting all the different colors and eating 7 to 8 servings, you may be able to get away with certain things. But I know the majority of Americans do not. So I don't look at an RDA and go, okay, that's good. I don't even some of the data that they came up with that, I don't necessarily look at as a good number. And I also look at, I mean, there's a lot of studies and data out there that, I've read through, and B12, again, because it doesn't, if you look, you'll occasionally hear somebody say toxicity, but there's really not a whole lot of toxicities with B12. It's a very safe substance. I've measured my levels a couple of times, and I leave myself on the very high side. Again, it's just neuroprotective. They did one small study in females. I would never treat a female this way, but it actually showed some benefit in reducing osteoporosis. So but it has so many good things. I mean, our brain is so reliant upon B12, and it's so protective that it's just something, especially with, again, our growth of dementia, regardless of Parkinson's, our growth of dementia and Alzheimer's in this country. I mean, the numbers are astronomical, the growth we're having. And I believe a lot of that is due to refined carbs, and even looking at some of those things, toxins and refined carbs. And, my phone probably has 4 technologies shooting through my brain. What does that deplete out of our system? And all those RDAs were never made for all this place, the place we're at now, the reused foods and our lack of intake of healthy foods and all that. So I don't really go with the RDA a whole lot. Like I said, in most cases, I feel like we need to be better than that, but there's tests out there. There's a good test called SpectraCell. If you ever really want to know where you sit, SpectraCell is a great test. You can go talk your doctor into running it. And it's a kind of a 2nd generation micronutrient test, and you can see where your levels sit. If you got great levels of everything, then you're good. Keep doing what you're doing.
Okay. How about, what about inflammation in the body? Don't you have more inflammation as you age?
Yes, because our body is not able to protect against oxidative damage as much. So we do have more inflammation, oxidative damage as we age. And again, that just goes more to, we need a little more higher doses of the nutrients, the anti-inflammatories, the antioxidants, to keep our bodies in a better reactive state to the external exposures that it can no longer keep up with due to age.
Okay. Somebody asks, what about FARO? FARRO. How about FARO?
As far as like the glycemic index on it?
I don't even know what FARO is. So what is FARO?
I don't either. So I'd have to look.
It's a wonder grain. It's way better than even the quinoa. It's like, you make cereal out of it. You can cook it up like instead of rice and everything. And it's a real hearty grain. But if you cook it long, it gets soft.
Okay. Let me take a look.
Very low glycemic index.
Yep. And see, I just pulled it up. So that's how easy it is. So it has a glycemic index of 45. That's right there with black rice. That's great. Yeah, that's a good number. So I think that would be great. I'll look after we get done. I'm going to look into it tonight.
Okay, Luann asks, what are your recommendations for Parkinson's patients who have pain from dystonia, for example? Well, can you tell me what dystonia is? She's asking dystonia.
Yeah. It's more like, I don't treat a lot of dystonia, to be honest with you, but it's the muscles are kind of hardening and having trouble moving. They're not moving, and they're just getting kind of like when your hands sort of get like this.
Oh, okay.
Again, I'm gonna first I would go meet with the PT. I mean, that's going to be very specific to somebody, or a chiropractor if there's a good chiropractor that knows rehab. But the other part is, again, kind of get it into anti-inflammatories, anything you can reduce. A lot of times I would look into maybe increasing higher levels of magnesium, seeing if I can relax those muscles down. Magnesium is a great natural muscle relaxer. But again, I wouldn't recommend doing anything until you ran that by whoever your current doctor is, because again, I can tell somebody to take, if somebody runs out here and says, I'm going to go grab fish oil but they're on a blood thinner. Well, I could have just created some issues for them. So that's why you need to kind of run it by your doctor, because he may look and go, no, you're on a blood thinner. You can't take fish oil. That'll change your clotting factor. So still think everything needs to be ran by whoever their healthcare provider is.
Okay, I think we got a couple more questions here. Janice asks, what exercises are recommended for those who cannot walk or stand for long and sometimes short periods? Janice is the activities coordinator for our adult daycare here. We have an adult daycare. So there are up to 8 people at a time visiting the adult daycare. And many of those people are at various levels of dementia, and many of them have trouble standing or walking for long periods of time. And Janice helps lead some of the exercise. So that's why this is an important question for her.
Okay. Well, that's not an area that I feel like I'm really an expert in, but what I could say, just kind of being an exercise enthusiast myself, is as much as you can, resisted exercise, having them against, finding some bands and having them work against bands and any movement you can get. But I would, again, on something like exercise, I was reading some of the data, but I would probably defer that to a PT, especially a PT or chiropractor that has more of a focus on Parkinson's.
But you can get those exercise bands that are really, you don't have hardly any resistance. So for older people, that would be perfect. They could sit in their chair and do this, and they can do that. Perfect.
Absolutely. And you can do all kinds of levels. I think the exercise bands are great. And as you get stronger, when you do any resistance, even if things are down, you're still going to get stronger. As you get stronger, you can increase the resistance, just a little stronger band.
Okay, I think Phil had one more question. Phil.
Dr. Tuggle, do you do support groups, Zooming very often? Are you available? Possibly, yes or no?
Actually, I don't. This one was, I try to do 1 or 2 talks a year.
Okay.
I haven't since COVID started, and I'm really busy right now, but
That's an answer.
Denny's one of my favorite people, so I had to.
I could be one of your favorite people. I'll get you baseball tickets. Wait, just to follow up on that.
Phil, it's
Okay, I'll give it up. I'll pass.
Okay. Does anybody else, are there any other questions out there?
Yes.
Yes, Phil.
Problem child.
Yeah.
You got quite a group here, Denny. Nice job.
Well, thank you.
Okay, well, dystonia. That's what I think of as freezing. D-Y-S, dystonia. And bradykinesia is that.
So we're going to have to, it's getting toward the top of the hour. It's 8 o'clock in Arizona. So I think we're going to wrap things up, Phil.
Yeah, great. I'm just trying to get a few words defined, but I should know.
I got the definition here for you, but it's an abnormal muscle tone resulting in muscular spasm.
That's Brady or dystonia.
That's dystonia.
Thank you, doctor.
Welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tuggle, for taking time. Just a disclosure, Dr. Tuggle's our family doctor. And months ago, during a regular appointment, I kind of asked him how he'd feel about talking to our Parkinson group. And to my amazement, he agreed. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you guys for having me.
Okay. And for everybody in the Juno Parkinson group, if you guys want to hang around after the webinar is finished, we can talk about the webinar and anything else you want. For anybody that we'd really like to know what you thought of the webinar, you can go to our Facebook page, Catholic Community Services in Juneau, and let us know. Or you can contact me directly, denise.darby@ccsjuneau.org. Okay, Dr. Tuggle.
Bye, Danny. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hey.